Hi there, welcome to today's painting tutorial. Today we are going to paint an elk in a mountain scene with acrylic paints, so let's get started. And don't forget to grab the sketch in the description below so that you can paint along. So I'm starting with a fan brush. I'm putting in some different colors for this sky. I'm using the fan brush because it gets a smoother appearance with acrylic paint, so you have less streaking and you can get more blended effects. You might also notice that my paints look a little different in this tutorial, and that's because I mixed them up with some titanium white, and I did this because I want to experiment with getting the colors to be even more opaque and less transparent. I put some of the grayish blue color in there, as well as this light purple to create a nice sky effect. You can use some white and put that on top to create some clouds. A fan brush is a good brush to use for painting clouds, so you should experiment with that. And the brush is also very versatile because you can use the edge of the brush to get into some of these smaller, tighter areas and corners around the antlers. I'm also using that Stay Wet palette. That's going to help the acrylic paint to stay workable for longer, especially in the winter right now. Everything is so dry. The paint is just drying so quickly. So using that Stay Wet palette is really going to help you. And then I took the fan brush and started putting in some of the mountain areas. Remember that in the distance, you want to make things almost like a violet, bluish color with a lot of white so that it's gray. That will allow it to recede into the background. So then the mountains that are closer in distance are going to be a bit richer and bolder. I'm putting in some of this orange burnt color, which makes a nice contrast with those cooler colors, and then a bit of green in there as well. I'm trying to put the background in around the subject, which can be a little bit challenging. Just take your time, go around the subject carefully, and it's okay if you overlap some of the areas a little bit. Again, that fan brush has a nice crisp edge, and that'll help you to get close to the sketch and get a bit more precision. I'm continuing to use that brush to fill in the mountains. I'm using this color that is a phthalo blue, and that is a bit richer. We're becoming darker and brighter as we come forward in space, and that's going to give the illusion of distance. I'm trying to start off with a mid-tone color here so that we can later go on top with some lighter colors to create that depth. And then I took a small blender brush and started putting in the rocks in the foreground. Again, these are going to be in the foreground, so they're going to be darker in contrast. So I used some black and then put some gray color on top of that. And then I used a gray color that has a little bit of yellow ochre in it. That's going to create a bit of a warmer color. You don't want your rocks to be all in one color. You can add some variety. And then I switched to an 8 flat brush, and I'm putting in that foreground, just putting in these really painterly little stripes up and down, putting in some green to create grass and a bit of that orangey color to also create that mountain prairie look. You can see that most of the paint is staying pretty opaque since I did mix it in with that titanium white. Then I took that yellow ochre, which also has some titanium white mixed in there, and I'm using the edge of the brush to just flick these little grass-like shapes. And again, it's very loose and painterly. We want the main subject to be the elk, so the background really isn't our focus, and it's okay if it's a bit blurry and undefined. Now with the flat brush, I'm taking some white paint and I'm just scumbling on some of this paint to create texture. It's going to create that appearance of snow on the top of the mountains. Just dragging the brush down, not having a lot of paint on the brush will help with this. And then I use some of that light green to bring that down. That's going to make the appearance that there are hills and valleys in the distance. And then I'm using the fan brush to fill in that last mountain that is in the distance behind the elk. And then that will be all of the background finished. You can see that I have gone over some of the main subject, but I tried to go around it as cleanly as I could. But once we put that other layer on top, it's going to look more cohesive, and any pieces that we accidentally painted over will fall into place. It's a good idea to step back while you're adding these details here because when you have a bit of a distance between you and the work, you can really see how these shadows are going to appear. Sometimes when you get too close, you get that tunnel vision and it's hard to see how these highlights are going to look in the final piece. Now it's time to paint the main subject. So I have some new colors here, but I also mixed them with titanium white so that we can work on these opaque colors. So I started off with a size 0 round brush, painted in the eye, the nostril, and the mouth. You always want to start with your dark values first and then work up towards your lighter values. Put a bit of gray in here. I have some blending medium in there or some acrylic retarder, so that's actually helping the paint to blend a lot easier than acrylics normally would. I just put a small drop of that into each pool of paint, and then I can get a nice blended effect. I'm almost picking up some of that dark color and dragging it into the lighter colors as I add them. So I'm putting in the dark colors and then putting in a bit of a lighter color next. So putting in some of this raw umber, which is a nice rich dark brown. Just building that face structure with the darker values and then putting in the lighter ones. Again, allowing it to blend nicely, almost creating the effect of oil paint. This canvas is a size 8 by 8, so the elk is on a small scale. Can be difficult to paint some of these smaller animals. So you want to use small brushes, take your time, and just try to get the values correct and not worry too much about a lot of detail. And then I'm going to be using a 1/4 angle brush, and this brush is really good for creating fur and hair texture on animals. So I'm starting with that raw umber brown, that nice dark brown, and just putting these in as little hair marks, just pulling that paint down in the direction that the fur is growing. And that's going to give you a nice first layer. Again, you want to start with the dark and then gradually get lighter. I have some of this burnt sienna that I'm then feathering in between those darker lines. Then I switch to a size 1 dome brush. Put in the darker values first. So we have that raw umber and then putting in the burnt sienna. Nice and easily. That paint is also blending a little bit as well. Again, working from dark to light. Legs are also not your focal point, so you don't have to put a lot of detail into them. Just going over it in one layer is good as long as your paint is nice and opaque. Then I'm going back to that 1/4 angle brush and continuing to build up the fur and the coat of the body. Again, I'm thinking about the direction of form, the three-dimensional shapes that make up the body of this animal. And then I take a larger blender brush and start blending in the rest of the body. I like how my paint is turning out nice and opaque like I wanted it to. I'm putting in these darker values first, that raw umber. It also has a bit of black in it, so it's a nice dark color. And then we go in with these lighter values. Again, working from dark to light. I'm using some of this beige and yellow ochre to put in the lighter values. That has a beautiful contrast that's allowing us to create that three-dimensional shape for the body. And now we have a really good first layer. So now it's time to sort of blend things and go back, make any adjustments. If you have any whites of the canvas showing through, you want to cover those up. Just do a bit of refining. Now to work on the antlers, I'm using a size 1 dome brush. Some of this beige paint, I want to put in the tips of the antlers first with this light color. Then I grab some gray and put that in next. Try to blend those colors together so that you get a nice smooth transition. Then I'm putting in some darker values along the bottom with some of that raw umber. I'm using a brush that fits closely to the shape of the subject that I'm painting. The width of these antlers are about exact to the width of this brush. So whenever you can, you want to try to find a nice match for the size of the brush that you're using and the object that you're painting. I'm putting in some more beige along the tips of these antlers and allowing that paint to blend together These aren't really the focal point either, so I'm not going to put a whole lot of detail and attention into them. Now I'm working on the eye. I took a 2/0 round brush. This is one of the smallest brushes that I use. I put a little bit of grayish blue and white in there for the eye, for that highlight, and then put a bit of a lighter color along the top of the lid and the bottom. So you want to be careful not to overdo the eye here because the animal is very small. You really don't want to make it stand out too much. It's not really going to show up very brightly when you're looking at an animal like this from the distance. So try not to make it stand out too much and try not to make too much contrast. Then I took that smaller brush and just started refining the face a little bit more, continuing to add layers and blend the paint, adding highlights and going back and forth between darks and lights. And the more skilled and practice you get with painting, you're going to be able to do these things in fewer layers while you're still new. Sometimes you overwork an area and go over it too many times just to get it the way that you like. But once you get more practice, it's going to be smoother and your work is going to be a lot cleaner. And then I did some finer refining and highlights. I'm using this size 1/4 angle brush and getting some really beautiful highlights, putting that in the chest area and along the back, as well as the tail. And these highlights really help the piece to come to life and just ties everything together nicely. Okay, and we will call this painting complete. Thank you so much for painting along with me. Like and subscribe for more painting tutorials. If you want to dive deeper into painting with me and improve your skills very quickly, grab my free guide in the description below. I would love to be your guide on your painting journey. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.